Right now, there are few stories as interesting and also important as the Republican race for president. You may have noticed that the field is starting to get very crowded, very fast. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott both threw their hats in the ring. And we just learned more are on the way. Former New Jersey governor and former Trump advisor Chris Christie will launch his own presidential bid in the coming days. And former vice president, that is, Mike Pence is set to make his run official as well. This is all very good news if your name is Donald Trump. We know this script because we've seen it before. In 2016, Trump won in part because of the size of the Republican field. There were 17 candidates. Do you remember that? 17 candidates. And they spent a whole lot of their time attacking each other and not exactly attacking Trump. That field was so splintered, it allowed Trump to knock his opponents out one by one while securing the base of support that he has still managed to hang on to even today. Now, we're about to see if the candidates of 2024 have learned anything at all from 2016, because if any of them actually want to be the nominee this time around, they're going to have to figure out how to effectively take on Donald Trump to do it directly. And if 2016 is any indication, they shouldn't wait around too long. Those are the dynamics taking shape before our very eyes, so there is already a lot to talk about, even though it is only June. Lucky for us, we have the perfect people to do it with. Jonathan Martin is a senior political columnist and politics bureau chief for Politico. He's been covering these candidates very closely, spending some time with them in their states. And Tim Miller is writer-at-large for The Bulwark and the former communications director for Jeb Bush's 2016 presidential campaign. Thank you guys so much for joining me on our Peacock launch. So, Jonathan, I want to start with you. You recently wrote about the consequences of the field expanding. Does this feel, I mean, as you're watching it, does this feel like it could be a repeat of 2016 to you, and how so?
Well, it certainly won't be in terms of the size. We're not going to have the upper teens of candidates. I think by the end of the year, we'll almost certainly have less than 10 candidates and maybe even like less than 8 candidates still in the race. And I think this is the big question is, what we're not talking about yet, but what your smart viewers should know, is that there's a pretty significant threshold, Jen, to get onto the debate stage. You're going to have 40,000 individual donors to your campaign to get a slot on the debate stage. Now, one of two things will happen. Either the candidates will fight that with the RNC because the RNC makes that rule effectively, or they'll give in and spend a lot of the summer buying Facebook and other social media ads to get small dollar contributions, basically spending money to make money just so you have that minimum threshold of donors. I raise all of this because if you're not on the debate stage, Jen, it's really darn tough to get your message across. And I think that's going to be the real threshold this summer and fall. Can all of these folks get on the debate stage? But there's no question, to your larger point, that Trump craves a split field. If you want to know what Trump thinks, it's like Joe Biden. Just ask him. He'll tell you. And, you know, Donald Trump, God love him, when Tim Scott got in the race, basically said, something like, field's getting bigger.
Welcome.
He was really excited about it, and it didn't really mean sports. Of course, Trump wants a bigger field. And by the way, speaking of Donald Trump being pretty open to all kinds of things, I think Tim would probably agree with me here. Trump would be happy to cut any and all kind of deals to keep candidates in the race longer than their viability, to keep carving up the vote, and would probably be pretty open about whatever deals he cut.
So, Tim, I want to play for you a little bit of sound from Governor DeSantis, because he, in part, is the candidate, at this point at least, that people think is the most likely to take out Donald Trump, if anyone can. I know you have some thoughts on that, but let's play that sound and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Why not take any questions from voters, Governor? Governor, how come you're not taking questions from voters?
Not coming up to me, talking to me. What are you talking about? I'm not here working with people. Are you blind?
What?
Are you blind?
I'm not blind.
Okay, so people are coming up to me, talking to me, whatever they want to talk to me about.
So, I mean, that was hardly the first awkward moment that Ron DeSantis has had on the campaign trail. I think it's safe for me to say there's probably going to be more in the coming weeks. But how much do you think his challenges as a retail politician matter? Is that his biggest challenge, or are there other ones that deserve more attention?
Yeah, Ron's a little bit of a prickly pear, isn't he? Man, I think that's a little bit of a challenge. But look, if you go back to our last two presidents, Barack Obama was a talented retail politician, but didn't do a ton of it. Donald Trump didn't do any retail and won handily in New Hampshire and South Carolina last time. So retail can sometimes be a little bit overstated. I think the biggest challenge for DeSantis that's related to this is he giving off the persona of somebody that is a winner, of somebody that can take the fight to Joe Biden, that Republican voters can trust that you know, if they put their faith in him, that he will actually deliver a victory next November. And that's the big question. And I think that where he has gotten in trouble here is he has this message of, oh, I've taken on the big fights in Florida and I've won, and I think that's a winning message. But then when people get to see him on the stage and they see that he's prickly, they see that he's really kind of passive and beta when he's trying to go after Donald Trump, they look at him, the Republican voters, and say, I don't know if this guy can actually beat Joe Biden. Maybe Donald Trump, who is that alpha male on the CNN stage, is the better bet. And if you look at polls right now, that's what it shows. So I think that's his biggest challenge. How can he prove that he is tough enough to take on to win? And I think the piling up of clips like that doesn't help.
So, Jonathan, to that point, and I don't think this is an easy question, even as a person who's done a lot of campaigns, but DeSantis has tried a lot of things, as Tim kind of referenced. I mean, he's been talking a lot about the elites. He kind of went after the elites like it was a tick recently. He's gone after the woke world. He uses that phrase a lot. Is there a strategy that has worked for him? Or as you talk to people on his campaign, what is their strategy to take on Trump and take him out?
Well, I think it's twofold. I think, one, he wants to show that he's a fighter, which obviously is what the Republican Party craves right now more than any kind of policy agenda. They crave the clenched fist. And I think DeSantis gets them that, as he's proven in spades in Florida. The other thing that they crave is somebody who can win. And they obviously want to take back the presidency, and that's part of the DeSantis pitch, which is electability. Those are basically going to be the twin pillars of his candidacy. I am a fighter and I can win. I think everything else is basically details. Now, the issue of how you sort of confront Trump squarely on both of those fronts, I think is a more complicated question, Jen. I wrote about this in my column recently, which is a lot of Republican voters don't want to have a frontal attack on Donald Trump because it reminds them of how Democrats attack him. So if you're a Republican, it's already hard enough to dethrone Trump because of his obvious strengths, but it's even harder when you can't even go traditionally negative on him, like every candidate in the history of time has done to make up ground against a frontrunner, because your own voters recoil at going negative against him. There's almost a sort of insulation. Our friend David Kochel, Tim, called it these antibodies that Trump has built up around him that are tough to penetrate. So you got to sort of almost go in a back door and attack him in a way that's not frontal, that is a little more sort of complicated, Jen. And that's a tough task.
So as all these candidates are getting into, I mean, you've advised a presidential candidate, and they're trying to figure out, they're elbowing each other out. They're trying to figure out who's going to be the one who takes on Trump. What's the one piece of advice you'd be giving to them if you were advising any of these Republican campaigns about how to do that?
Yeah, look, to Jonathan's point, I think that you've got to figure out how to walk this fine line where you have to criticize Trump, but not in a way that turns off the key voters in this primary. And at any time, and this is, not the kind of voter that I would be talking to if I was running for president, because I'm disillusioned with the party, but that from a strategic standpoint, the core voter in this primary likes Donald Trump, but is open to moving on from him. So how do you speak to that voter? How do you demonstrate to that voter that you are a better alternative? Well, you've got to offer a contrast with Trump, but not too harsh of one that makes them not like you, that makes them think that you're a Tim Miller bulwark, never Trumper type, right? And so, you have to test those messages and test them out. And I think really the only people that could possibly pull that off are people who are giving off a MAGA persona and come from the MAGA wing of the party, come from the newer wing of the party. That's what I think, frankly, of all the people that you named, Vivek Ramaswamy, who viewers might not even know, is this businessman who's come from the outside. He kind of has a better chance to do this than any of the Republicans that have come from the pre-Trump era, the Tim Scotts, the Mike Pences, who really, I don't think, have any path to walking that fine line.
Yeah, Jen,
Jonathan,
we will
go
use
ahead.
this first edition of the Peacock Show to make some news here, and you can pull this tape after
Let's
the
do
Iowa
it.
caucus.
Let's make some news, Jonathan. What do you got?
You can pull this tape after the Iowa caucuses. I will tell you today, I think Tim would agree with me. I think that Vivek Ramaswamy, if he's still in the race and has not had some Herman Cain-style explosion, kids look it up on the Google there about Herman Cain-style explosions. If he is still in the race on caucus day next year in Iowa, I think Ramaswamy will draw more votes than multiple sitting and former statewide officials who are also in the race. And
That is not what I expected you to say. Tim, do you agree with that?
I do. I honestly, I look at the field, and it's hard to see anybody besides Trump and DeSantis that have a chance. But if I had to pick one other person of the existing field, Ramaswamy is the obvious choice. There is no Chris Christie, Mike Pence, Tim Scott, these people, Nikki Haley, these people, Republican voters, if you look at the Bulwark focus groups, we have a podcast where we talk to MAGA voters. They smell establishment, old pre-Trump Republican Party on Pence, on Christie, on Haley, on Scott, and they do not like it. If they don't want Trump, they want to go with someone else who feels MAGA, who feels like they're an outsider, and of the current field, Ramaswamy and DeSantis are the only ones that fit the bill.